Greetings and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. As an extension of my Instagram page, Cerebral Women, this podcast offers insights into the visual art world. I interview artists, mainly artists of color and female artists who will freely articulate what inspires their creativity. In addition, you'll hear interesting perspectives from dedicated art professionals who work with artists and the art institutions that feature them. I'm confident that collectively, these individuals will indeed stimulate your mind as they do our eyes. Please know these interviews are conducted in my Manhattan apartment, so please forgive the background sounds of city life. Welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. In this episode of the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast, I interview emerging artist and painter Anastasiya Tarasenko. Born in Kiev, Ukraine, Anastasiya moved to New York City with her family at 6 years of age and has lived in the city ever since. She attended art schools early on and ultimately received her MFA from the New York Academy of Art in 2017. I met her and first viewed her work during the 2020 Spring Break Art Show, which I must say is a non-traditional exhibition platform that features unknown, emerging, mid-career, and beyond artists. Thank you, Jerry Saltz, for bringing it to my attention. I was captivated with her paintings, which some would most likely label as disturbing, warped, and twisted, but of course I was fascinated and could study her work for hours. I should also mention that Anastasiya paints on copper. Her work is more provocative than the reclusive outsider artist Henry Darger, who actually passed away more than 2 decades before Anastasiya even began to draw as a child, so there's no question that he did not influence her work. Yet her work is equally as strange. Now is the time to focus on Anastasiya as her career begins to blossom. She will be in 2 group shows during the summer of 2020 and a New York City solo debut in the fall. My final note, in my opinion, Sigmund Freud and his peers, once upon a time, would definitely have aimed to destroy her unique intellect if allowed. And with that, enjoy her, and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. Let's start with you telling us about yourself. Give us an idea of what your childhood was like, and when did you realize that you are innately an artist?
Well, first, thank you for having me. This is an amazing honor, and I'm really happy to be here. So to answer the question, I knew I was an artist. I guess knowing you're an artist sounds like a lofty thing to say. I was drawing from a very early age. I spent a lot of time alone, even though I had 2 older sisters. Both of them also drew. So I always had access to some sort of pencils or papers or something. So I'd always keep little notebooks, and I would be drawing from a very, very early age. And so I would have binders full of fashion designs, you know. My memories of them, they were really good, you know, but looking back, if I ever find them again, I'm pretty sure my parents threw them out by now. They were probably awful, you know. So our childhood memories are of good drawings, but I would love to see what I drew like as a kid.
Were your sisters drawing?
My sisters, both of them were drawing, yeah.
With you?
Separately. But definitely I have a much older sister. She's 10 years older than me, and she was drawing all the time. So I kind of got it from her. I admired her so much, you know, and I got her art supplies and her papers, and I would doodle on her drawings. She would hate that.
I'm sure she was flattered.
And then I would also have a secret book of drawings where I would draw little naughty things, you know, just like any kid discovering a new language or a new set of images. I would draw little naughty things just for myself that I would either rip up and throw away right away so my mom doesn't find it, or I would sort of find a secret place to stash them.
So how old were you? Was this pubescent, or was this...
Pubescent, prepubescent. Probably I was like 8, 9 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, just about then. Even when I was in Ukraine, I remember I would be drawing all the time there too. You know, we didn't have video games or anything, so I spent a lot of time alone, a lot of time drawing, and a lot of time playing with my other sister, who's 2 years older than me. So that was our fun.
So what did the drawings look like?
So apart from the fashion stuff, I was really into fantasy, so science fiction fantasy. And then I was really into making little naughty doodles of naked women specifically. I was not into naked men at all. I guess I just didn't know what they looked like, so I didn't care. So I would draw like little naked women everywhere, and I would giggle and hee hee, and rip them up, and maybe share them with some of my friends, and they would do the same thing. So I guess that was like our version of internet porn at the time. And we had a network of exchanging drawings. And this was about like in the late '90s, before internet became a huge thing. So we got a computer after a couple of years of living in America. We finally got a computer, and we didn't have full internet access. We had Net Zero. I don't know if you remember.
No, I don't remember.
Net Zero was free internet, but you had to sit through, I don't know, a crazy amount of ads and about 30 minutes of loading time per page.
Yeah.
So you had to really want to use the internet. So that was my access to exploring that set of imagery from an early age, was by drawing my own version of it, because I just didn't, kids these days I think have a very different experience with that than I did.
Yes. And I'm sure your experiences were better than some of the experiences these kids are having now.
Yeah.
So I know your family left. You were in New York. Mm-hmm. What was your early childhood like?
So I was born in Kiev, Ukraine in 1989, which was right at the cutoff of the collapse of the Soviet Union. I think 89 was when the Berlin Wall fell. And then shortly after that, everything collapsed. So I was the youngest of three kids, which for a Soviet family is incredibly unusual. Most people have one kid, maybe two kids. Three kids was extraordinarily weird. And my mom hid her pregnancy from even her parents until she was practically in labor, because she was mocked. She was heavily made fun of for keeping a third child.
Amazing.
Yeah. And the Soviet Union, I just learned that recently myself too, because I knew that abortion was like a pretty, it was not only legal, but it was, everybody was doing it. And they had some incredibly progressive liberal policies regarding abortion. The Soviet Union was one of the first European countries to legalize it. Not one of the first, it was the first. And it was quite commonplace. So that, as a form of family planning, I guess I should say, because resources were super scarce. It was really poor, we were in a really poor family in a poor neighborhood, and food was, rationed, especially at that time. Food rationing was a big thing. And so I remember, I feel like an imposter sometimes talking about this, because I was a small kid. I was 6 years old when I left, so my memories are that of a child. And when you're a kid, you're not familiar with any other kind of opposing experiences, so you think everything is normal.
Right.
So I thought it was normal that, if we had a banana, we would split it three ways. A banana, which by the way was a complete luxury thing, a rarity, right? Having a banana was like, whoa, crazy. Same thing with like things like hot dogs, right? A hot dog was like, also we would split it three ways among three sisters. And I just remember we always had food on the table. Meat was a luxury too. I remember my mom saying food rationing was about, you either get a ration, I may be butchering the numbers on this, but it was either 1 kilogram of meat per month or 10 kilos or 5 kilos of bones. So my mom would, get the bones, because you could make more broths and bone broths and all that stuff with bones. And, Food was scarce and rare, especially when you're feeding three kids instead of one or two. So I have those kind of memories in the Soviet Union. But I thought it was normal. I thought it was okay. Everybody else was going through the same stuff. It was not unusual. So when we moved to America, we were called over by relatives who had moved a couple of years prior to America, and there were a lot of programs at that time in the mid-'90s that helped Jews as refugees to America, because Ukraine, Russia, et cetera, is notoriously anti-Semitic still to this day. So most of the immigrants that came over from the former Soviet Union were Jewish in the mid-'90s. I think that's definitely changing now, because those programs are done, they're over. So anyway, so we benefited from one of those refugee programs. We came over to the United States. My parents sold everything, and we moved into an apartment in South Brooklyn. To an amazing neighborhood. I lived there literally my whole life. When I moved back to New York, I moved back to that same neighborhood.
Good for you.
It was Bensonhurst, South Brooklyn. Very not cool, but very vibrant, very diverse, very cool. Everybody was from somewhere else. Nobody was an American. Nobody was born there. So I went to great school. I had a really great experience. It wasn't really until later or after somebody told me that, God, we were struggling or we were poor. My dad, who was an engineer in the Soviet Union, when we first moved here for the first few years, he was cleaning up parks, getting whatever jobs he could get. My mom was a home attendant, and I remember one specific memory. I started school, and I remember my parents were fighting. And they were like, I don't remember what they were fighting about, but they said $200. Like, we have $200 until the end of the month. I didn't understand that what they were fighting about was the fact that $200 is not a lot of money. I thought $200 was the largest quantity of money I had ever heard of. So I went to school the next day and I started bragging to all my friends, my parents have $200.
That's cute. That's cute.
And I didn't realize that. I felt like an idiot. I told my sister, and she's like, do you realize that $200 is not enough to get through the rest of the month?
Do you have memories of seeing someone eat an entire banana or a child having their own hot dog?
It wasn't, no, not until I moved to America.
Yeah, but do you remember what you thought the first time you saw that?
I was like, wow, we could get anything in the stores here. Everything. I was fascinated by ketchup most of all because I'd never seen anything like it. I hated it. I was like, what is this creamy goo? But there was just such an abundance here that I just was so unfamiliar with. I was like, what do you mean we could just go to the store and spend 25 cents on a bunch of bananas or a bag of potato chips? And everything felt so abundant. And, that was so not the case, especially in the mid-90s. Things were tight in Ukraine. My sister was describing that money there was like, it was like bricks. It was worthless. We'd have like a stack of money and you could literally build a fire with them and you'd probably get more out of the money, a little bit of warmth because you couldn't buy anything with it. And then America was like this land of plenty, Can't describe that enough, just how privileged I feel that my parents moved here and took us out of that and brought us here and really struggled for the first 10 years of us being here. And just the privilege I feel of being an artist here too is, something that I wouldn't be able to afford to do if we had stayed or, so it's like being an artist is a privileged thing. Even though I have no money, I'm not making money, you know what I mean? It still feels like a huge, enormous luxury privilege to me because I can make that decision and I can also speak my mind freely and I can also make art about certain contentious things and not be disappeared,
That's scary.
Or, yeah, exactly.
The thought, right?
Yeah,
that
but
happens.
Exactly, and it could happen is also what keeps me thinking harder, working harder, that it could happen to us, and sometimes you kind of get a little glimpse of what could happen if things continue going in the way that they're going, so we got to hold on tight, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting. Tell us about your experience getting your MFA. How did you, because you transitioned from illustration.
Yeah.
Share with us that.
Yeah. So illustration was what appeared to be the practical choice to make art because I didn't know that fine art was a thing. My parents encouraged me to make art as a kid because it helped me get into public school programs in New York City. Like New York City has some amazing public schools that allow you to get in according to testing and whatever, and you don't have to pay anything. So my parents took advantage of that from an early age. So they encouraged me to draw so that I could get into gifted and talented sort of schools. But then when it came time to go to college, they were like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Art is not an option. But I was like, listen, I'm paying for my own school. I'm indebting myself. I'm going to make my own decision.
Oh, really? So even though they didn't discourage you as a child, they discouraged you as a young adult.
While both of my sisters did draw, they didn't want to pursue it through college. One of them is a doctor now. The other one is an accountant. So it's like, they did the practical things. I think especially coming from an immigrant background, your parents want to make sure that you have a better life than they did, that you don't struggle. And they saw the word artist and they saw struggle. They only saw not making money. In Russian, the word artist has the same root as the word skinny. So there's a joke like artist, like you're always hungry.
Yeah.
So
Malnourished.
Yeah, exactly. And in Soviet Russia, like as an artist, you were either an agent of the state, and you make propaganda pictures, or you are subversive and you disappear, So it just wasn't a thing. Nobody was an artist. It was kind of a luxury that nobody could afford. So I did it anyway. I was like, you know what? You're not paying for my college tuition. And at that point, I had zero concept of money or debt. So I'm like, I don't care. I'm signing all the student loan forms. I'm indebting myself for tens of thousands of dollars because I don't care and money doesn't exist. Of course, later on, I
for the
figured out
love
what
of
money
art,
is.
For the love of
For
art,
the
right?
love of art,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
But later on, I'm like, oh shit, money actually is real, and I do need to pay my bills, and debt does suck. But I went to school for illustration, and I thought that would be the right thing to do. I was a huge fan of sci-fi and fantasy illustration growing up, like Frank Frazetta, was a huge thing for me as a kid, like Boris Vallejo. And these were all like these very muscled people with little bikinis on, slaying dragons with swords and stuff, right?
So what did your work look like?
Something like that. Something, like teenage drawings of dragons and, the women with very big boobs and tiny, tiny little nipple tassels, with big swords and shit and blood. And I was, I felt so bad for my teachers growing up because I'm like this 14-year-old kid and I'm drawing naked things, and they're like, they don't know what to do with me. They don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. They're like, oh, Anastasia, you do whatever you want to do. We're not even going to say anything about this.
Did they ever question or wonder what inspired those images in your brain?
I think I did get in trouble at one point in junior high school. I had a book of poems that I wrote, really cheeky poems. So as a kid, I was exploring the dark side, right, as kids do. And I wasn't a depressed or sad kid, but I really was fixated with like death and suicide, like a goth kid with metal, listen to metal music. I was really attracted to the darkness.
Were your parents freaked out?
So freaked out.
I bet.
Freaked out. They didn't let me wear black clothes. They didn't get it. They were super, super freaked out.
That's funny.
I come from a conservative religious background. Like they just didn't know what to do with me, and neither did teachers either. But for me, it was all in good fun. I'm like, oh, this is just me having fun. Look at me, I'm a happy kid, but I'm writing these like angsty poems, I had a blast. All my friends had a blast. But one time I left my notebook. I think I did it on purpose, if I remember correctly.
Subconsciously?
I subconsciously left it on purpose. I wanted it to be found because I wanted to shock somebody or something, like any kid does.
Yeah, because your work is shocking.
Right. And I had those
Naughty
impulses.
you.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, oh shit, like I want this to be found. What are they going to think? They're going to think I'm so cool.
See, if I was an artist, I probably would have behaved like that.
And I'm like, shit, they don't actually think it's cool. They're terrified. They're worried about me. And I had a run-in, and I was scared shitless because I didn't anticipate them to send me to like a therapist and try to get at whether I'm, actually suicidal or anything. And I remember I had a teacher, a vice principal at the time, who sat me down in her office, and this was in South Brooklyn in Coney Island. And she's got this really thick Brooklyn accent, long fingernails, like really a lot of jangly jewelry. And she just looks at me and she's like, are you suicidal, honey? Like point blank, not even a hello, sits me down, asks me that question. And I'm like, no.
I'm just having fun.
Yeah, I couldn't articulate. I could articulate that now.
Right.
But I was so scared, And so, yeah, I had like a couple therapist appointments, and the therapist was like, dude, you're fine. Everybody relax. She's fine. She's cool. She's just exploring whatever kids need to explore at this age because they don't quite understand it. I didn't quite understand what death was or suicide or blood or any of those things, but they seemed cool, and then later on I look back and I cringe now, and I'm like, glorifying any of those things, you kind of, as an adult, gain a huge sense of empathy for other people suffering or for suffering in general, that as a kid you're still exploring what any of it means, especially when you don't have parents or teachers or anybody that really talks to you in any sort of intelligent way about those things. So that was my way of doing it. Since then, I sort of found a better way to express those thoughts and feelings and those impulses. but I still have those awesome childhood memories of sitting in an office terrified.
I bet. So so how did you transition into, like, what was that intellectual process of transitioning from illustrating to actually painting?
I thought that illustration was the only avenue for figurative work, and I was really into like tight drawings, tight renderings, figurative things, realism. I always thought fine art was abstract. My parents didn't really take me to museums or expose me to like a broad avenue of cultural things. So I just thought illustration was it. That's the only way for a figurative artist to express themselves.
That's interesting. Huh?
Yeah. And then eventually, I went to school for it. I failed miserably as an illustrator because it's actually very difficult. It's much more difficult than fine art because you have to not only work by yourself, but you have to work as a team, as a collaborative effort with a whole set of other people, not just one other person. It could be a whole team on the opposite side of you telling you what to do and sending you edits. And, it's not about you anymore. It's about you as part of a big team. And I just wasn't into that. I'm fundamentally selfish, with my impulses. I want to do what I want to do. And anything else just doesn't come out right.
That's consistent. Yeah. That's consistent. Yes.
Yeah. So anytime I did one illustration job, and it was for a book called The Sins of Psychology. And he's a researcher in England. And we had a really great collaboration. It was just me and him. And I made it look like medieval woodcuts, showing the sins of psychology, going point by point. And that was the only one in the
Did they send you back to the therapist?
I should have been, because I was so miserable in terms of I'm like, oh gosh, there has to be something better for me. There has to be a better way for me to express myself. And so I worked, after I graduated undergrad, I worked as an agent for a while. I worked as an assistant agent in an illustration firm, a boutique illustration firm. And I was like one of 3 people in the office, and, I would do business stuff, and that's where I learned taxes and all sorts of valuable information that I needed to learn that they don't teach you in school, especially not in art school. And all the while I'm home and I'm miserable. I'm making art, but I don't quite know where it fits. Is it illustration? No, it's not. Is it fine art? At that point, I still didn't know what fine art was or if it existed really for me. And then I decided to go back to school. And the only school I applied to, grad school, was the New York Academy of Art, because their whole selling point was, come figurative drawing people, come. Let us show you the ways, right? So it seduced me in that way. So I applied to it, I got in, and I went. And that's where I started my metamorphosis. And I started to learn about what fine art actually is. And all my ideas of it were actually wrong, And I had a blast. Yeah.
So your work is intricate, it's complex, it focuses on I'm going to say the human anatomy, as in genitals. You look at it, you feel pain, you feel joy, you feel anger. So share with us, what do you want your audience, what do you want the viewer to feel when they view your work?
If confused.
Confused is I think that's the perfect word.
Conflicted, contradicted maybe. Mm-hmm. I think we live in a really complicated world. And to create, I don't want to create a picture that just does or says one thing. Whether I succeed every time I make a picture is a whole other thing. But my basic impulse is I want to show that the world is not only a complicated place, but it's full of darkness and lightness, and we're capable of great things and we're capable of terrible things all at the same time. And we can never run away from our animal nature. It betrays us at every turn. So if in more complicated pictures, each little vignette can be sort of read on its own, and where I use sex and where I use violence and where I use anatomy is to show that animal side of us, that no matter where we go with our brains, we'll still be in a basic animal body with basic animal needs. We can never escape that. We can only maybe keep it under some form of control, but even that goes horribly wrong most of the time. If we try to completely limit our sexual impulses, then that goes wrong and people become repressed, and there's all sorts of awful things that happen from repression. If we overdo it and overexpress it, other awful things happen. So it's just, we just live in a bag of complications and every single day, and we're sort of living in an interesting moment right now because this is the first time in human history where we're able to communicate across thousands of miles instantly. And now we're exposed to all sorts of other kinds of things. And now it's becoming overwhelming. And, I could go on and on about that, but the point is everything is complicated. And if somebody looks at the picture and it's like, I don't know how to feel about this, and I don't know how she feels about it either, then that's fine with me. That's optimal for me, actually.
So do you think the critics understand your work?
I don't know. I think I don't hold a monopoly on understanding my work, if that makes sense. And I don't want to, so if somebody does or doesn't or understands it differently than I would understand it, not only is that okay, but having a stranglehold of understanding would be unfair and unrealistic, So I had a review in the Boston Globe. It was my first newspaper review. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, and print and I have half a page and and she was very complimentary. I would say it was about 75% nice and complimentary, but she did squeeze in a few like little nips,
Describe the nips.
One of the second or third sentences was, but she is young and her content not yet cooked. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to carry that for a long time.
Young and not yet cooked.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm like, at first I didn't know how to feel because I'm like, okay, my first print published review is 75% positive. That's 75% a win. And I'm like, okay, I'm looking at this all wrong. It's 100% win for me because this woman took the time and they gave me the respect to actually write about it. But of course, I'm very hard on myself. So if I see any sort of bad anything or any sort of word that I don't necessarily like, I'll really internalize that, and I'll carry it with me and, it'll contribute to feelings of inadequacy and whatever else. But, I think I came out of that feeling, not only is this a fantastic lesson, but it's also, I feel like a really great win for me that she even gave me the respect to critique me, So.
And 70% is a strong yes. It is. It's anytime it's over 50, okay? And it's substantially over 50. So you should feel good about that.
Yeah.
And I don't understand. She said it's not cooked, so meaning it's very raw.
Raw, yeah. In particular, she was pointing at a self-portrait that I had done, which was raw, but it was meant to be raw. So I make some portraits when I'm sad and depressed and anxious, because it lets me weaponize. I like to say weaponize my anxiety, if that makes sense. Where I will take my insecurities and the things I'm most scared of, and I will turn them into art. And if nothing else, I've turned those anxieties against themselves. I'm like, well, I made something out of you. Fuck you, anxiety. I made something out of you. You gave me the energy to make something. So I don't stop doing, I just do something else. I'll make really angsty, kind of nervous, anxious self-portraits. And I exercise a demon, so to speak. The
self-portrait I remember seeing was a nude self-portrait. Is that correct?
Yeah, where I'm sort of slitting. There's a heart there and there's some words around it. I think she looked at that and she thought, that I'm crazy because the words around it were they were a letter to myself basically saying that you will never be satisfied, it'll never be good enough, things like that. But it becomes a halo around this figure, this icon, and it essentially empowers the figure. Even if it wasn't a self-portrait, these words of sort of self-loathing empower her in some way, and she creates something out of it. I could see where somebody would look at that and be like, God, she must be neurotic or something. But I'm no more neurotic than anybody else. I listen to the neuroses and I try to let them out as much as possible, and I feel like if I'm public about them, then maybe somebody will relate to that. And maybe they just won't be so bad anymore, because I feel like we all share similar neuroses amongst each other. We're not that unique or singular to have completely novel thoughts and things we're anxious about. So I try to think about where I'm the same as everybody else. And if I just say it out loud, then maybe that'll that'll bring me closer to everybody else.
The advantage of being an artist, you're allowed to express those deep feelings. If you're a banker in a suit, you just have to hold it all in and go home and who knows what you do.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's talk about your residency in the south of France. I know you traveled. There were four. Was it four of you that went there?
It was
five of you. How did that experience influence you, and how did the people that you traveled with, how did they influence you?
So this residency that I did, it was Will Cotton, who's a trustee at the New York Academy of Art. He was organizing a residency in a little French village called La Napoule, which is a 15-minute drive from Cannes, right on the water. There's a big castle there that belonged to this American artist, expat, who moved to France, who had tons and tons of money. Really weird guy, inherited a bunch of money, refurbished a castle on the water in the late 19th century, and made very bizarre art. Henry Cloos, his name was, Henry Cloos. And so you have this great, crazy castle on the water that's filled with this surreal, figurative work that is now a foundation. And so Will did the residency 20 years ago when he was a young artist. And now they invited him back to organize a residency 20 years later. And so he just tailor-made this residency. He wanted to choose 4 artists, apart from himself, of various stages of their career. So I was the youngest. I was the baby of the group.
So 5 people in this huge refurbished castle.
Yeah, so our studios were in the castle, and then across the street from that castle was I called it the Muffin House. It was a pink chateau with white frosting, like white decorations. Also on the water. It belonged to a woman called Daisy, Princess of Place. You can't make this stuff up.
Did you ever think that your weird art would lead to this?
Never, ever. You know, when he chose me, I was like, what? Me? Are you sure?
Sounds like you fit right in.
Oh my God. Because I was also the youngest, I was literally just out of school, you know, and nobody, in terms of like galleries or anything, nobody was paying attention to me. Nobody was really buying work or, you know, doing much with me. So I'm like, I had deep-rooted feelings of inadequacy of being there because everyone else was like doing really well or really established. But I felt like I was the fly in the wall in this great conversation every night. So we spent every dinner together. We had breakfast together every day. We drew a couple of hours. We would have a model that would come to the house. And then we would have dinner together every night for a month straight. And I was there with Hilary Harkness, David Humphrey, and Ivy Haldeman. And Will, of course. And then I was the baby. And what could I contribute to the conversation? You know, I have my own thoughts, feelings, and ideas and opinions and everything, but they had the experience, you know, and I was so thirsty for that. You know, I think as a young artist just out of school, it was really easy for me to create a mythological future, you know, where if I just get this gallery, if I just get this career marker, I'll be happy and everything will be great, right? So what I learned from them was that you may be better in your career, you may be more established in your career, but you'll still have worries and thoughts, and you'll still experience everything that I'm experiencing, but in a different way, in a different scale, you know. And it really demystified a lot of that kind of like, if I'm a successful artist, everything else will be fantastic and I'll never have to worry about anything ever again. And it demystified that completely for me. And I'm
welcome.
Yes. And I'm like, actually, no, you know, there will always be things to think about. There will always be improvements to be made. There will always be thoughts to be had. There will always be something, you know.
Right.
Content is always a goal marker away, a goal post away, you know. So it was incredibly valuable. But it also coincided with like this really horrible depression. Like I've never experienced depression like that before. I had just graduated school. I was 6 months out of school, and it was graduate school. So that's literally the last school you can do, right? And I was 27. I was 26 or 27, and I was like, shit. Well, this is it, huh? You know, this is the rest of my life. I can't go to school anymore. I have to figure everything out. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know anything. I have no money, and nobody. Like, I'm going to say this. Nobody wants me. It seemed like that at the time, even though I'm in the south of France. Whatever. But anyway,
right.
I'm a
well, you're
mopey bitch
young,
sometimes.
so yeah.
So I was really depressed. While I was there, and I remember in the Mediterranean Sea, we were right in the water. I would go to the beach, and I would cry, and I'm like, "What the fuck is wrong with me?"
Did they sense that?
I cried in front of Hillary, and she's so sweet, and she's one of the kindest, sweetest people, and she's been really helpful for me in the years since, and in front of Ivy and Hillary, and I felt like they were my family in that moment, and it was really sweet.
How much older were they?
Ivy is, I think she's a little bit older than me. She's a few years older than me, but she's been at it for longer because she's been out of school for much longer. And Hillary is, I'm not sure, I think 40s, so quite older. She's about the age of my sister, I would say. So, I have these two other women, they're older than me. I feel like they're my older sisters, and they're comforting me. And I'm like a piece of shit crying in the middle of this amazing day in the south of fucking France.
An amazing opportunity. Yes.
I'm like, what is wrong with me?
And you're so special because they picked you. That alone says a lot. Yes.
And then I'm like, and then it sort of became this thing. I'm like, why am I depressed in what is essentially an incredibly privileged position to be in? And a lot of it had to do with feelings of deep-seated inadequacy, like I didn't belong there. I didn't deserve to be there. And I was really grappling with those feelings. So the depression passed. Luckily, I haven't felt anything like it since. I've sort of found a way to sort of keep my mental health in check, and to, if I see it coming, like I know what to do. Like I'll make a moody self-portrait or something, and ever since then, it's been good. I've just been making work, and even if it's quiet in my studio and I'll have mopey feelings, I could deal and process with them relatively well now.
So you're introspective.
Yeah, probably too much sometimes. I just wish I could turn it off,
Yeah, but it sounds like you're in a healthy state. And when you get off course, you can bring yourself back.
Yeah.
And it's a consistent manner of bringing yourself back.
Yeah, well, after dealing with something that deep and dark, you almost never want to go through that again. So you almost want to shield yourself somehow and find the right things to do. Maybe it's my diet. I don't know. Having the right people around you. I have a really fantastic boyfriend. He's really good. I have great friends, So I talk a lot about these things, with my friends.
Oh, that's good. It's therapy. Every therapy session, right?
Exactly.
Inexpensive therapy.
Exactly.
So it was while you were there that you started to work with copper?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Explain that.
I had taken an etching class in school, and etching just wasn't for me because it's super process oriented. So you have to make sure every step along the way is 100% right. And I'm like lazy. I want immediate results, and I just wasn't into it. But I had all these really beautiful plates, and I had learned that Rembrandt painted on the back of his etching plates sometimes. And those are some of the most gorgeously preserved paintings of his. A few of them only exist. But then I really read into it. There's a whole tradition of painting on copper, oil paintings on copper, that goes back a long time. It went out of fashion at some point, still out of fashion, mainly because, copper as a surface, it's heavy, it's cumbersome, it's not easy to get. I won't say it's expensive because it's actually not expensive at all. People think it is, and if they continue to think it is and it looks expensive, I'm not going to I'm not going to tell them they're wrong. No, it's so I started painting on it, and I never looked back. It's really an amazing surface to work on for the way that I work.
So it tarnishes? How do you manage that?
Even like a penny won't tarnish for a long time, and if it does, it turns brown, so it's not really that tragic. But if it's exposed to acid, then it turns green. So I just take care not to expose it to anything acidic. And if I varnish it, it won't tarnish. It's only if it's exposed to oxygen and oil, like hand oils and stuff, that it tarnishes. So with a nice coat of varnish, and if it's not touched, then it actually won't tarnish probably for 100 years, And even if it does, there's something that happens with the adhesion of oil paint to copper that it bonds in a very specific sort of way, which is what allows it to be preserved. And it's archival, I should say.
Right. What's the heaviest piece do you know?
It's supposed to be like 75 pounds, 80 pounds or something. Yeah. Yeah, but that's because I made the mistake of using a furniture grade birch ply behind it, which itself weighs like 50 pounds. So they're heavy. I have good shoulders.
And transporting.
Yeah.
And the galleries, I mean. So the piece that I saw at Spring Break, was that on copper?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that, huh? So how much does that little piece, how much did that weigh? Or does it weigh?
It's not that much. I found a way to make a cradled panel that doesn't have it. Maybe it weighs like 5 pounds or something. It's not very heavy.
You, Stephen Zevitas, publisher of New American Paintings, invited you, he wanted to feature you. Mm-hmm. And Daniel, the author, Daniel Maidman, he commented that he considers your work, he considers you a literary painter. Share your opinion on his opinion.
Well, literary painter sounds like a narrative. Not narrative. It sounds like a linear narrative, right? I think the word anecdotal is probably best suited, because the narratives are so not linear. But the way that he described it, which I really appreciated, was that he chose to follow a very specific line, a compositional line, thread through the work, and that's why he described it as, what was the word? Literary, right? Because he read that one thread, and there's multiple threads. I love that he also focused on the development of my work. Like he showed a few of my really, really old paintings, like back when I was painting beautiful women with, stuff on their nipples. Very tight paintings. So literary, I would say anecdotal, but I appreciate that he took a literary stance to it and tried to create a narrative, a linear narrative from it,
It was an interesting read. And I liked the images that he chose. Yeah. Let's talk about what artists influenced your work. Is there an artist that did influence your work at all?
So I wasn't familiar with any contemporary artists, really.
That's
when
right.
I started doing it. Yeah, it was pretty dumb when it came to fine art.
So it's really organic.
Yeah, well, I was really into medieval art or Northern Renaissance art or... and through that, I was exposed to other kinds of medieval work from other regions, like Persian miniatures, and even my own cultural background. Like miniature art is a huge thing, making miniature lacquer boxes, miniature paintings and lacquer boxes. There's like a juicy deliciousness to it. It has an object quality to it. But I, even from an early age, was obsessed with medieval stuff. Van der Weyden, Van Eyck, Hieronymus Bosch, Bruegel, things like that. Those were the people that I looked to and I looked at. For me, they were the most interesting.
It's pretty weird.
Yeah. Yeah. But when I was in school, the New York Academy favored. They had a very Eurocentric art historical model, and it was not only Eurocentric but like Southern Renaissance focused, Caravaggio is the greatest, painting started in Italy. And I was like, no, it didn't. Because I strongly still dislike Caravaggio. I know, please, people don't hate me too much. I don't like Caravaggio. I never did. But because I didn't, and I had to articulate why I didn't like him, I had to gain a stronger sense of why I don't like it and what it is that I do like. So I focused more on Northern Renaissance, even when my teachers told me to focus on Southern Italy or whatever it is. But then even the distinction becomes really silly when you start talking about one region versus another. I mean, how much does it really matter where painting started, or the evolution of painting as if it's some sort of trajectory from worse to better? I thought all of those things were bullshit.
Yeah, and how can we be so sure?
Exactly.
Before we end this, I do want to ask you to share with us upcoming shows, residencies, those things in the future that excite you.
Yeah. Well, 2019, I had nothing going on. 2020, I have a ton of things going on. I'm really excited. Very nervous.
Don't be nervous.
Oh, God. Well, it's the first year where I have to really deliver, I have to really, I'm going to be seen and where you're making work in your studio quietly by yourself is lovely, because nobody's looking and you could do whatever you could fuck up as much as you want. There's much less license, I think, to do that now. But not complaining. I'm so excited. I have a group show coming up at Anna Zorina, which Deborah Brown is curating with Patty Horing, the self-portrait show. That's happening sometime in the summer. I don't have an exact date right now. And then I have a group show at Monya Row Gallery, where I'm also having a solo show at the end of the year. And Stephen Zevitas was saying about going to Miami in December, but it's still quite early to even, I've never been to Art Basel. I'm excited. I've never been to Miami, period. I heard it's a spectacle in the best possible way, in the worst possible way. I'm not sure.
You'll enjoy Art Basel. It's an interesting collection of work, definitely an interesting collection of people, and the weather is fantastic. There's a lot of parties. The weather's great. It's Miami.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. I appreciate you coming here.
Thank you for
It's been
having
great.
me.
And don't change your painting style. Keep it kinky. Keep it unique.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.